I just want to share something from my cousin. He grew up in a very yeshivish environment in Gateshead, and then he studied actually in the Mir in Yerushalayim. And he messaged me. I invited him to come check out the class if he wanted. He can work with some people on their textual skills. But when he was very busy, but he watched the whole last year we did, and this is what he said. He said, "What I'm more impressed by." No, he said. First, he said, "You have such a nice crowd of guys, and your rabbi is one special person, very good at conveying his mahalach. However, what I'm more impressed with is that the guys are happy to go with it, because while it's the most thorough and solid system, I'm amazed at how you guys are willing to have the patience to go with it and not get lured into the much easier and more superficial learning most people end up doing." So this is a person who's studying in Kollel, who's giving us his askama, saying that this is probably more legitimate than just about any way most people normally learn. So I just had to share.
Okay, thank you. Really, the thanks goes to Reb Yitzhak Kamperton. He's the author of this wonderful little sefer. And as we progress in our learning, we'll integrate the Rambam.
I gave you back I gave you back where I gave you back the response from the seller. So, do as best as you can on the best price, the lowest timing, and that'll accelerate the process, obviously.
Okay.
Well, I'm just got to jump on this call. I sent you back. I mean, I didn't mess with your timing.
Yeah.
Your timing can go faster. It will certainly be better.
Yeah. Maybe you can mute.
I can mute him. Yeah.
Right. Fantastic. Oh, okay. You can put him back on. Yes. Bring David back to us. You don't have to mute him. Okay. You can unmute David if you like. Okay. Okay. So, quick review. Our aim is to communicate to the Kodesh Baruch Hu. He's given us this document called the Torah, which clearly defines what he wants us to accomplish in this world, not only us, but all the Jewish people throughout all the generations and all the non-Jewish people also. The difficulty or the challenge is, since it's from the Kodesh Baruch Hu, it's a very deep document. And it requires serious study, like any advanced document that you may, or any subject matter that you may study that's advanced. The Darkei, Yitzhak Kamperton in Darkei Talmud gave us, just a very quick review, a very short list of 3 major things to focus on when you're reading a text. One was Yitur Lashon or Kafel Inyan, which means we have to see if there's any extra words or a repetition of an idea, even if the words are different, but if it's the same idea, we have a problem. The problem is that Hashem is telling us something and we're not being sensitive to what he's telling us, so we have to investigate that. The second rule is that there has to be a chiddush in what's being told, even though there's no extra words and we've never heard this subject matter being spoken about. If it's telling us something that everybody knows, like the sky is blue, then it's not the Torah. It's a waste of time. It's not Kodesh Baruch Hu giving us this important Torah. And the third rule.
So can I ask a question, Rabbi?
Please. You can ask any question.
It seems like then, if the Torah was to say the sky is blue, it's not actually telling us the sky is blue. It's telling us something different.
Yes.
Unique. Okay. Fine.
Okay. It was look for inconsistencies in language or in dinim. In other words, if the language all of a sudden changes when we're talking about one subject, we switch to a different subject. Well, why was that change? Manashtana. Why is there a difference? Shinui din. We have to look for changes in law and understand why one law follows another one, and and if it has the same law, then why do we need two laws if it's a different law? So what made it different? Okay, so we have to look for the factor that caused the change. Or if it's not a law, if it's an Indian, also, if it's subject, again, subject matter, and that means content and words always have to be consistent. So if words are being used inconsistently in a Mishnah or in a Gemara or in the Chumash, we have to raise a hand and say, wait a minute, we're missing a subtle point. Now, once we make those three basic observations, then what we have to do is Dorish Choker B'Shoel. We have to explain those changes or extra words, investigate them deeply, Choker, and we also have to ask if we don't understand something, raise a hand, ask your learning partner, ask your rabbi, ask the great Rishonim. Questions are the foundation of engagement. And without a question, you can't really understand the depth of too many things. If everyone just looked at the world in a simple view and didn't ask about anything, they wouldn't get very far in their understanding of the complexity of life. So questions are very important. Okay, you have to ask. You have to also investigate, and you have to then explain things. And in the end of the day, when we're talking about Torah and we're talking about mitzvahs, which means that the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants to express certain things that he wants us to do, actions that he wants us to do. So you have to always define what is the mitzvah and what is the law. Okay, in other words, the case and the law, to make it clear. So what is the action involved and what's the law? So when we did last time, we worked together, we made our little chart here, and on the top, we followed no say mishpat. We put here case and law, no say mishpat. And on the side, we just put the two names of the verses. And then we divided the Pesukim into actors, actions, and victims and results. Okay, that's how we divided the.
Rabbi, let me ask you a really dumb question.
Please do. Great, no dumb questions.
The word Kiddush means
smart.
The word Kiddush means it's something different than what it sounds like. I mean, it's like a special meaning or a special.
You see, that's a great question. You see, there's no way that I could understand that you didn't understand this concept. And it's a very important concept. It's one that the Darkei Gemara speaks about at length. The Kodesh Baruch Hu is always telling us a new idea. He never tells us things that we would know already. Okay, so for instance, a person should work 7 days a week. There's no reason not to. It's a healthy activity. It's a productive activity. Matter of fact, it's a mitzvah to do what's called Yishuv Haaretz, to actually. The Ramchal explains the world is a potential, and it's our job to take this potential and make it into an actual. We build buildings, so we do business, we help people in medicine. That's what the world is for. It's called Yishuv Haaretz. Now, there's no reason why we should stop in the seventh day of the week. Comes along the Kodesh Baruch Hu and says, no, we want you to stop. No work. Now, that's a chiddush. That's something that goes against what we would normally think that we should be doing. We're here to be productive citizens of the world, and to help settle this wonderful place that we have and produce beautiful things. So why are we taking a day off? So that's called a chiddush, to tell us stop. Now, the reason why we don't think of this chiddush too much is because we've lived in non-Jewish worlds where they've copied the Torah, and they've taken days off too. Okay, but their day off is not our day off. Okay, because our day off of Shabbat, first of all, has 39 different activities we can't do. Those are called the malachas, and also it's a day we're taking off to think about the Kodesh Baruch Hu. After that, think about the Creator of the universe. And that's a very, very special day. A lot of people don't do it. They just go to sleep or, eat during the day and have a nice meal. But it's really a day to So that's a chiddush. A chiddush means that a normal, healthy person wouldn't do it. Comes along the Torah and tells us, do something. You can be very, very healthy and eat meat and milk. Excuse me if I offended any of the vegetarians, but people who eat milk and meat are very, very, very strong. Rashi said, you just look around. They're very, very powerful, very healthy, normal people. So the Torah tells us a chiddush. No, you can't cook meat and milk together. Okay, that's a chiddush. That's something that goes against what we would call common sense. When I talk about common sense, I talk about healthy common sense, not insane activities that we may be seeing around us, unfortunately. But a healthy person could eat milk and meat, no difference. Shatnez, wearing linen and wool together. You won't get any disease if you wear linen and wool together. It's a chiddush of the Kodesh Baruch Hu to say we the Jewish people can't do that. So every time the Torah talks, and Kodesh Baruch Hu talks to us, is telling us some new information that we would have thought the opposite of. We would have never come to this idea. Pesach. What are we doing Pesach for? So that's called a chiddush. So, and it's very important that you said that. It's a lot of his book is dedicated to the fact, to this very, very big secret that the Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't say simple things that we know already. Okay.
Just a quick question though, don't we
Yes.
sometimes, like I think Avi was sort of bringing this up last week, is sometimes something can be said or repeated for emphasis. How is that a chiddush?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. There's something called that the Torah is dibra b'loshen b'nei adam. Okay, that's not, it's a machlokas actually. But does the Torah use common language? Like if you knew Hebrew, to give to say a statement to emphasize a statement, you say so is that just the way that Hebrew works as a language, or is that considered a extra word? Okay, so that's something that we always have to consider. What's called normal in the Hebrew language, and what's called a chiddush. Okay, that's sometimes we're going to have to, but the Kodesh Baruch Hu will never tell us something that we would know already. Now, that being said, there are special circumstances where the Torah will repeat something, but the chiddush of that is that it comes to Mamayat. So I don't want to get into all the details of that particular statement, but basically, we always want to see something new that we would not have thought of before. It has to take us into a new level of understanding.
Sorry, Rabbi, what's the word mamayla? It comes to mamayla?
I said mamayet, I said.
What does that mean?
To when something is repeated, when two laws are repeated, so then you can no longer generate that law in another case. That's a rule called Shnei Pesukim Habayim Ki Yachad Ein Melamdin. It's a rule that when two Pesukim tell you the same information, you can no longer use one of those Pesukim to generate the laws in other places. Yeah. Okay, that's what it means for Maya. Normally, if a pasuk is given, then you can then extrapolate to, if it's let's say a klal, kol malchus of Shabbos, a chayav stila. So then you can extrapolate, and once you know the details, then you can say that's also chayav stila. Yeah. But the Torah, if it repeats itself in two places, it came to say, from now on, I will only tell you this law. If I tell you the law specifically, then it's the law, but you can no longer extrapolate. Okay, we'll get into those details as we go along.
I normally wouldn't interrupt, but I just want to welcome my chashuv cousin. He's learning in Kollel in the UK, and he's joining us. He was the one that I read his haskama to the class at the beginning, just saying how thorough the rabbi's system is, etc. So a giant welcome to him. He studied at the Mir in Yerushalayim, etc. And now he's joining us beginners here and to help us along in the process. So, yeah.
Wonderful. What's your cousin's name? I don't see him up on the chart.
You might have to scroll across. It says Tammy Kruger. It's Yehuda.
Yehuda Kruger, yeah.
Hi, Yehuda. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, I see Yaakov's here also with us. Oh, good. Very good. Okay. So, I didn't know that you can actually see all the people. Isn't that nice? Okay, great. Wonderful. Okay, I must say, and I'm not being humble, I'm just telling you the reality. The information you're getting here is from a great Rishon. He's telling us how to learn Torah. And the depth of understanding and the conciseness of his communication is something that I only wish I could have done. But my rabbi, Rabbi Goldstein, used to say, Torah, Torah, teach me. The idea is that let the Torah tell you how to learn itself. Now that's not so simple, but definitely we don't want to push our ideas into the Torah. We don't end up making the Torah as a reflection of ourselves. So the Torah has to teach us. So these great chachamim of the past generation have given us the tools to accurately understand the Torah, and that's a wonderful blessing. My addition is a little bit of Word and PowerPoint, things like that, but basically the information is theirs. Now this I did, Machadesh, they didn't write this in the book, but it's obvious since he says you're supposed to break things into Noseh and Mishpat. So I just made a table. What did I do? I took a word and I made a table out of it. Okay, so here's our two pasukim we're going to investigate. One pasuk says, "Umaki ishu meis mos yumas." When a man hits another man, the penalty is that the Beis Din kills him. And the other pasuk says, "V'ish ki yakeh kol nefesh adam mos yumas." When a man will kill any human being, the penalty is death. Okay, so what we did was last time we met together is we just put these two pasukim in juxtaposition, and we spoke about all the differences. So we noticed here, for instance, so first of all, for those of you who've just come in, we broke the pasukim into Poel, the Hefel, the Pu'ula, and the Mesubav, and the Mishpat. In English, the pasukim talk about someone doing an action. I call him the actor, the Poel. An action that he's doing, that's called the Pu'ula. And then there's the victim, the Hefel, who receives the action. And then there's the result of that action, which we call the Mesubav in Hebrew. And of course, there's the law. So the first pasuk said, Maka ishu meis mos yumas. And last time we were together, we copied and pasted the subject of this sentence into the first box. And we noticed there is no subject here. It just says Maka, it's just the verb. Who is the hitter? Doesn't say. Interesting. Then the action is Maka, hitting. The victim is an Ish in the first pasuk, and the result is that that person dies. Good. And if that Poel does that Pa'ula to that victim, and that's the result, the penalty is Mos Yumas. In the second pasuk, we said, who is the Poel? Well, we said it's the Ish. And Ish, here all of a sudden, he comes alive. We don't know who he is in the first pasuk. In the second pasuk, he is an Ish. And then, instead of just a simple mark, it says when he hits a man. That's the condition statement. And then, as far as the victim is concerned, as far as the victim is concerned, in the first pasuk it was a man, an Ish, and in the second pasuk it was Kol Nefesh Adam. And we divided that victim into three parts. The statement in that victim. One, it was the call part of the statement. One was the nefesh, and one was the other. And we said we have to explain again. Rule, too many words, right? I would have just said ish. Why are we saying, or just adam? If I just would have said adam, you would have said to me, what? What's the difference between adam and ish in our system here? Anyone want to take a
Yoiser Lashon?
No,
or extra words, I thought.
No, it's not an extra word. What's the difference between ish and adam? It's we need a victim. That's not really extra. Anyone want to take a shot at it? Don't be shy.
Could you? Oh, go ahead.
No, you.
No, maybe I should write these in English, but okay, here, Shinui
Yeah, I was
Lashon, I'll give you.
I was gonna ask if you could redefine Shinui Lashon, Shinui Din, and
Well,
Inyan.
oh, very good. That's exactly why I asked, Baruch Hashem. Because a lot of times I know what I'm talking about, and I realize other people don't know what I'm talking about. Well, you should know what I'm talking about, because this is an interesting way of analyzing the Chumash. I don't think anyone has ever really done it this way in a chart, but the people did it in their heads. Don't get me wrong. We'll see Rashi did it. Okay, Shinui Lashon means that there's a change in language. Here, the victim is an Ish, and here he is an Adam. That means that the victim changed from an Ish to an Adam. That's called a change in language, okay?
Right.
Good.
So it's, yeah, go ahead.
Now, the fact that it says Nefesh Adam is too many words. Just say
So that,
when a person kills an Adam. What is he? What are you adding by the word Nefesh Adam?
But isn't Ish like masculine man, and Kol is all, Nefesh is soul, and Adam is person. So it could include women.
Ooh.
Now you're talking about what's the import of these changes of language. You with me, David? Now you're really asking the question. You first have to identify the what, and then you have to say the why. The what is here that there's a change in language. The why is now for us to Choker, Shoel, and Doris. You're trying to now explain the why. You with me? How I'm presenting this?
Yeah.
So someone just asked what is called Shinui Lashon, the changing of language. A change of language means that we were talking about an Ish in the first pasuk, and now we're talking about an Adam. That's a change of language. Okay.
and Shinui Din would be if the mishpat was different,
Excellent.
and
Sure.
the language was the same.
Exactly. What would happen if all of a sudden, if the second pasuk said that it is not the death penalty? He has to pay monetary compensation for it. That would be a Shinui Din.
But that would only be a Shinui Din if the lashon was the same, because if the lashon was different, so then we would just say, yeah, it's a different language and different din, but that's because we're talking about different things, right?
Oh, now, beautiful. We would have to then explain why the language changed. Are you with me?
Sort of.
First, okay. We have to do two things. We first have to notice if there's if all the parts of the case and law are stated. Number one. Number two, we have to see if there's any extra words, and then we have to see if there's any difference between one case and the other case, and then we have to check out if the laws are the same.
I guess what I'm asking is, what links these two psukim? I mean, I'm sure they're linked because you've put them here, but why should we even assume that these two psukim are even related to the point where we're comparing them?
Okay,
and I guess,
very good question. Good question. Because this apparently looks to be an example of kefel inyan. What was kefel inyan?
Right.
That means when we look at these two statements, it looks like it's just repeating something that we already know. The words are different. No one's going to argue about that. But it looks in the inyan, which means in the message seems to be the same. In other words, when we look at these two pesukim, we see that a person hits another person and kills him, and the din is that the Beis Din kills that person. There doesn't seem to be any new information in the second pasuk as far as the baseline understanding. Now, of course, we're going to look very carefully and analyze any subtle differences, and those differences will teach us that there's important information in each one of those statements, and that we need both statements. But on the surface, this is just a simple repetition of something we know already. If I ask you, if a man kills another man, what's the law? You tell me, most you must.
Right. But I guess what I'm asking is, if we have kafel inyan, right, but we also have both shinui lashon and shinui din, couldn't we then by default say that wouldn't we always say that the difference in language is to indicate the difference in din? And that basically that brings the question, is it possible to have a case where it's coupled because of kafel inyan and also have both shinui lashon and shinui din and have it be a question? I meaning, like, is it one or the other, or is it possible to have both shinui lashon and shinui din and still have a question over there?
You can have any one of these possibilities.
But not more than one? Or they could all be together in one instance?
In this case, many of them are together. But yes, no, you can have two different statements in the Chumash that look to be using totally different words. And when you analyze both those statements, you'll say to yourself, wait a minute, but when I analyze the statements, it's telling me the same information.
But
So
Avi,
all the possibilities are possible. Okay, that's why he's telling us this is a checklist. No matter what pasuk you look at in the Torah, it's a checklist.
Can I try? I'm sorry to cut off David Zoller, but kafel inyan sounds like that's the starting point. That we see that, and then we do deeper analysis, basically, and we go into all the other areas because these two things they sound like they're saying the same thing. So why? But obviously we know they're not. So we need to start investigating, right?
I don't know if Avi is satisfied. I don't know if I.
Well, Avi's asking deep questions.
You're just asking. Just as many combinations can you have? Excuse me.
The den is the same. Den is law, right? Den is the same in both scenarios. So I don't understand that question. If the den is the same, why would the language change?
Well, I'm saying, I guess I was asking in a case where, let's say hypothetically, we have a case over here where the language changes, right? And so that's a question, right? But what if we also had a different din? So would that still be a question? Because then you're like, yeah, it looks like it's the same issue, but it's kind of obvious that if the language is different and the outcome is different, so that's not really a question anymore. And I guess I was just wondering if it could occur that way. But maybe that's too abstract. Maybe we should just.
Well, no, I think it's a great question because what you're saying is if the language sounds the same, but the din is different, does that also work? And I would say, I don't know for a particular example, but if we saw similar pasuks in the Torah that had another link, as in the actor and the action and the victim or the result were the same, but the din was different, then those two could also be linked. But I think here, because we're focusing on mitzvot, that's what links us in these two pasuks that we're talking about now. So what I'm trying to figure out is what's the difference between Adam and Ish?
Yeah, that's what I want to know too. Can I just, before we go back to Adam versus Ish, I just want to point out something from last week really quickly that Avi brought up that at first I argued on very heavily, and I realized that what he said was actually correct. So Mois Yumas, in both psukim, I had sort of said that there doesn't have to be a link if they have the same din. And I was using the example of like a kid can get a reward of a blue lollipop for doing one thing and get a blue lollipop for doing something completely different. The same result or same law, let's call it. But in reality, I think I thought about it more and like, if you're going to have the same law for something, in reality, there probably is a very strong link between them. So I thought about it.
Now, okay, let's get a few things straightened out here, okay?
Okay.
First of all, this checklist that we have is a checklist of observation. That means we first have to observe if things are equal or unequal. If things are unequal, then we really have no problem because that would mean that there's a chiddush in the second statement. Our problem comes when things are equal. The Torah will never repeat anything. So if two statements are saying the same information, we have a problem. You with me? So the first thing that we have to do is observe and see if the Torah is repetitious. Hashem is never going to say something twice. He won't do it. In the whole Chumash, You'll never see a statement repeated, except a certain, I have to put on the side just for completeness, there is a certain time when it can happen. But that also teaches us a special rule, okay? So let's first, what we're trying to look at is how to analyze the statements in the Chumash so there's absolutely no repetition. Remember, Hashem doesn't repeat anything and everything is necessary. If I see a repetition or I see something that's unnecessary because I know it already through common sense, then I know I'm missing a point. I raise my hand or I flag the word or I flag the statement and I say, wait a minute. Hashem doesn't repeat. He doesn't waste words. It's got to be telling me something new, okay? Now, how that can happen in a lot of different scenarios, okay? It could be that two things have the same din and they're not related at all. A person can get Mos Yumas for many things, not just murder. So our problem is not that the din is the same here. The problem is that the no-say, the subject, the case is the same. That's our problem. It looks as if, even though the words are different, these two cases are telling us exactly the same information. That's our observation, number one. Go ahead.
So the no-say is kafel inyan.
Exactly. Well, I can't. Listen. How can I explain this? Kafel inyan mean, in order to have a statement, I must have a subject and a predicate. I can't say ish and tell you anything. And I can't say mace and it doesn't mean anything. I always have to say that there has to be a subject and a law. In this case, the predicate is a law, okay? So the first case, I have to make sure that I understand what is the case and what is the law. Once I understand what the case is and the law, then I could look at other pasukim in the Torah and say, wait a minute, has this case and law been told to me already? If it has, bells go off, raises of hands. I have to start to think. There must be some reason for this because Hashem doesn't repeat things, okay? So these are the observations that we made, okay? Now, what's the differences David wants to know? Well, we're going to have to look at the differences. That's exactly what the study is. Right. But before you can look at the difference, you have to have observation. You have to notice that there is a difference, okay? And that's a very important thing. You can't explain something that you haven't observed. You first must observe something carefully and then say, wait a minute, based on this observation, there must be some new information brought here. So let's now look at Rashi.
I have a quick, so Adam would be a Shinui Lashon, right?
No. Shinui
Adam
Lashon
and
means
Ish.
that, oh, good. Yes, Adam and Ish is a Shinui Lashon.
And Nefesh would be Yoser Lashon?
Yes, exactly. It's not teaching me anything new.
Define that, Abby.
It's an extra.
Soul.
Oh, got it. Okay.
An extra word. It's like a redundant word, an unnecessary word.
Right.
Okay.
And the word call also is a redundant word.
Right.
I don't know. I could have in the first pasuk it didn't say a person who hits any ish, call ish. It didn't say that.
Right.
It's understood it means an ish. So the word call is also. Go ahead.
So what do we call the difference in that one of them doesn't mention an actor and the other one doesn't mention a result? Is there a term from the Darkei Gemara that references this, the absence of?
Yes, this is the absence. Excellent question. We're going to have to also investigate that. That's also a Shinui Lashon.
Right.
A Shinui Lashon just means that the language changed. In this first case, the language changed from not speaking about the actor at all to speaking about a specific actor. That's definitely Shinui Lashon. It doesn't have to be two words that change. It could also be blank. And in the result here, we have the same thing. The first pasuk talks about the result of Misa, and the second pasuk doesn't tell us what happened. We have to know why. Right. Excellent. That's also Shinui Lashon. So we've learned, and this is why this is. I bring this as an example. First of all, we have Rashi who's going to talk about it, Baruch Hashem, And second of all, it's a very obvious example here of application of what Yitzhak Confidant just told us. Look for extra words. We see here, as you said, extra words. Here, we just had the word ish. Here we have kol nefesh. That's extra words. Look for shinui lashon. Why do we call him ish over here and we call him adam over here? Right? What else do we want to look for? Shinui din we don't have here because the fact that we don't have if we had the shinui din, we'd really be in problems, right? What happens if this pasuk said the base din kills the person, the other person says no, he takes money.
So can we see
This is not an example of it.
Can we see the Rashi that starts to compare? I think.
Yes, sir. Let's go down to Rashi now. Let's go down to Rashi. Okay. So here we do split view. Extra credit. You get little courses in how to use Word if you don't know how to use Word yet. All right. Okay. Good. Now here's Rashi. Okay. Should I read or does someone want to read? I can ask the volunteers here.
Maybe, I don't know, David Zoller or Josh, do y'all want to work on your Hebrew a little bit with
time's too short for us to take.
Fine, I agree. Okay, fine.
But Benji's joined us if you want to ask him.
Benji's on? Yeah. Give it to Benji.
Okay.
This is David Zoller's son. He serves in the army in Eretz Yisrael.
Wow.
Okay, Benji, you're on.
Sorry, I just got back from a run. Where are we up to?
Up over here.
Rashi
now, this is Rashi. What does Rashi say here? First line.
Makeh ish vamet.
Now, that's already, I have to stop you. Sorry for interrupting. The classic way that Torah commentaries work is that they quote exactly the words that they want to comment on. Okay? So those is very important to always focus on the beginning words that are being spoken. Good. So he wants to talk about Makeh ish and mace, which is which word? This is the first pasuk, correct? Here. The first pasuk here. Is that right? Good. That's his focus. Now, what does he say? Yeah. Please continue.
Kama ktuvim ne'amru beparshat Rotzchin. Uma shebidei leparsha lama ba'u kulam efaresh.
Okay. Please translate that in Russian uncoded. In English. Okay.
How many is it written in our parsha of Rotzchin?
Good.
Like
now
killing?
That's very good. That's a direct translation. But in Lashon HaKodesh, when we say Kama, it may even be in Lashon HaKodesh. Kama Ketuvin, Rashi says there are many verses that speak about murder. Okay, Kama Ketuvin Nemru B'Parsha Rotzach. There's many. Just why I have to take a short break. Okay. Imam in the middle of the class, is all right? Yeah.
We get Shalom bias lessons.
Okay, all right. I will get back to you. Okay. Shalom bias. No, it's very important. My poor wife is getting a checkup. Okay, great. So we're gonna let me help you out here. Okay. So Kama Ketuvin Nemru B'Parsha Rotzach. Rashi says there are many verses that are spoken about in the parsha in the context of murder. Okay, Uma shibiyadi leforesh lama ba'u kulam, and what is in my hand to explain why they all came eforesh. I will explain. Now, what is Rashi directing himself at when we look at that checklist here? What do you think he's directing himself at in that statement?
Kafel Inyan, maybe?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes.
Because he's saying, why do I need to there's so many of these psukim about murder. He's like, why do I need to bother to explain them? Meaning that there's
he's saying just the opposite. Since there's so many psukim about them, what I can explain, Masha bi'adi leforesh, why they're all coming, I will explain.
Right,
Okay.
that's what I meant. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay, so he's saying there's too many kafalim. You know, we only looking at 2 pasukim. Rashi's looking at all the pasukim in murder. Okay, but he has the problem of, hey, wait a minute. There's so much information here, and it seems that it's to the untrained eye, that's repetitious information. But what I can explain, I will. Rashi's a very honest man. He's telling us also that he will not be able to explain all the Shidui Lashons, Shidui Dins. Okay, you're going to have to either look to other Meforshim, other places, but Rashi admits his inability to explain everything. But what he does know, he will explain. That's very important. Okay, that's called honesty. So let's just do the first one. Okay, what does the first one say? Was that Benjamin? Who's reading there?
Yeah, Benji.
Go ahead, Benji, please.
Makeh ish v'met lama ne'amar. So why does it use this specific pasuk? Lefish ne'amar in Vayikra, like it does in Vayikra, v'ish ki yakeh kol nefesh adam mot yumat. When a man strikes down another nefesh, adam mot yumat. So this is where I assume it's going to be confusing, as the language is quite confusing. When a person strikes another nefesh, the person will die. He will certainly die. Shomea ani. I understand this to mean haka'eh below mitat, that he indeed, this is the time when somebody hits, but the person does not die. Keep going.
Keep going.
Talmud lomar. That's we have another pasuk that comes to teach us makeh ish vamet. Someone hits, a man is stricken vamet, and he dies. Eno chayav ella behakeh shel mitah. You're only chayav, you're only liable in the case when you strike someone and he dies immediately, presumably.
Great. Now, if you notice, I wrote Aleph and Bet here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Aleph and Bet means Rashi is comparing these 2 pasukim that we've been talking about. Okay, as an example of seemingly kefil inyan, and he's going to tell us why, if we have the first pasuk, we need the second pasuk. What does he say? First of all, which pasuk is he commenting on? Maki ishu meis. He's commenting on this pasuk, and he's telling us, right? Lama nema. It seems that this pasuk did not have to be spoken. It's kafel inyan. Why do we have to say it? Okay, and he's going to tell us why. Lefishinema, because in Vayikra we need the first pasuk in Shemos, because in Vayikra it says V'ish ki yaker kol nefesh adam mos yumas shomea ani hakor below misa. What in the second pasuk would indicate that if a person hits someone and that victim didn't die, he would still get the death penalty in the second pasuk in Vayikra? Anyone have an idea?
Could you ask that question again? I'm sorry.
I'm saying in the second pasuk here, Rashi is telling us that if I had the second pasuk alone by itself and I didn't have the first pasuk, I would come to the conclusion, Shomea ani means I would infer that even if a person was hit and he did not die, just by hitting a person, even if that person does not die, the penalty would have been that the Beis Din murders or kills that person. So I'm asking, what if I only had this pasuk? Rashi says I would come to the conclusion that the Beis Din passes the death penalty on a person who just hits another person. Mm-hmm. How does Rashi make that inference?
Because the masubab is empty.
You see this masubab here? Remember our masubab here empty? Rashi is saying if you have an empty masubab, you would say that a person gets the death penalty even if there's no result of death. Answers one of our questions. What does it mean when the Torah leaves something out? Interesting question, right? Mm-hmm. When it writes different words, we could say that's wonderful, it's a Shiur Lashon, but what and if it leaves something out? So we have to understand a principle. The principle is that again from Dr. Gemara, the more you write, the more specific is your law. The less you write, the more general is your law. That's the rule. If I say the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, since I have all those adjectives, it's talking more and more about a specific subject, the quick brown fox. So if I have less adjectives, it's talking about a more general. When the Torah doesn't tell us what the result is, we presume it's the most general result. Okay, so here,
so it sounds like the inference that we make from there being no Masubab is that he did not kill him. He just hit him at the least possible. It could be like a little flick. We would just assume that it's a broad, it's a hit, whatever the definition of hit is, that's what it falls into. But we don't assume more specific than that.
Exactly, just hitting without that result.
Right.
Now, don't be so surprised. What does the pasuk say when chas v'shalom, a person hits his parent? What's the penalty?
Probably death.
Yeah, moshimas. So don't be surprised. It's not like it doesn't exist. But since the masubah here, the result is not mentioned, we would, and if I only had that pasuk, I would say, wait a minute. That means the Beis Din passes the death penalty, even if a person doesn't die, if he's just hit. So therefore, I need the first pasuk, which says "Maka ish umeis," emphasis on the word mace here. When a person hits another person and the victim dies, Eino chayav ela hakor shel misa. He can only be chayav. He can only be sentenced to death penalty when he hits the person and that person dies. Okay. So if you notice here, Rashi is directly. You see, it's sort of simple to the big Torah learners that they're doing what we're doing, but for us who are new to the game, so it's a chiddush. But Rashi's just doing what the Dr. Gemara told him to do, which is to say, wait a minute, if you have a shinui lashon, one case is specific, one case is not mentioned, so why do you need, what's the chiddush? And the chiddush Rashi said is because I need the first pasuk to define the limit of the, I need this first pasuk to define the limit properly. Now, I have to speak to you at length about limits of law. That's what he says over here. These are all new ideas to people, and they're very, very fundamental and important. He says over here, a very good lashon, he says, V'hagbalato so saviv b'guvulav. When you're doing your analysis and you want to know a case in a law, you always have to know the hagbalot. Hagbalot means limits. Okay, you always have to define what is the limit of the law, and this juxtaposition of these two pesukim is defining the limit of the law. Is the limit that when a person hits another person without a result, is that the law of Moshe Mas or not? So the first pasuk is necessary to define the limit. It must be that the other person dies in order to get that penalty. Okay?
I'm sorry, maybe I'm not following, but then if that's the case, then what does the second pasuk come to add at all?
Fantastic. You are following. You are following. So now you'll ask the corollary question. Now, if I know
If the second,
already,
right.
If the first one tells me I only get the death penalty when the first person dies, what do I need the second penalty? The pasuk for, right? It's extra. Just it's unnecessary, right? If I have the stated case that he has to die, so what do I need this unstated case for? What is that coming to teach me?
Maybe for what David Zoller said, when it says nefesh, it could be including also a female as well.
Well, remember, don't mix up the victim with the result of the victim.
Ah, fine. We're just looking at that.
Okay.
At that.
We're just
we're
looking
looking
at
that specifically. Fine.
Okay. So what would be wrong if I just wrote the pasuk, Maka Ishu Mace, and I don't need the pasuk of Kol Nefesh and tell me Mos Yumas. Why do I need that this pasuk at all?
But how can we look at it just on the Masubam and not the noise said the whole case, I would think, we would have to look at it together. How can we break it down to look at just that one piece and see what the that's what we're learning from Darkei Gemara. That's what it's telling us.
You're going to have to make a distinction now. The question is, what distinction are you going to make? You can just make a distinction in the Poel. You could say, wait a minute, if I only had the first pasuk, I would have said what? So you could tell me, I would have said that a person doesn't have to die to get the death penalty. Well, you just told me he does have to die.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me now.
I guess it could include. I guess the second pasuk include the pratim of maybe women and children, and not just ish men, but any time he hits. And again, we are assuming that that person dies,
one
right?
second. Oh, that's the problem. Now
no, because we have the first pasuk to indicate. I'm sorry.
That he has to die. The first pasuk indicates he has to die, right? Now, what happens in the second pasuk? Do they have to die also?
Yes, because the second pasuk is a subcategory of the first pasuk.
That's an interesting idea. So
Perhaps.
The answer
to
your question,
about,
it's no, it's good. Why do I say that? You have to learn to be an observant Jew. You have to make these proper observations. Now, and also you have to give what's called in the fancy world of learning hypothesis. You also have to try to answer the changes that you're observing. But then the third thing you have to do is check out whether your conclusions that you're drawing are conclusions that we really have in the Masorah or not, okay? Because it could be that you're on target, and it could be that, wait a minute, someone will say something slightly different, okay? So, great. Why it's true, I don't know. I mean, why do we need the second pasuk? Good question. Now, when it comes to the Poel, the victim, we are going to ask up and down. We're going to say, if I had the first one, I would make a mistake with the second one. And if I had the second one, I would make a mistake in the first one. There we are going to cover both parameters, okay? When you're driving, you have, on the highway, you have a speed limit, which is how fast you're allowed to go, and another lower limit of how slow you're allowed to go, correct? You're on a highway, you can't go too slow, you'll get a ticket too. So there's two parameters in that din. There's a lower parameter and a higher parameter. In the Torah also, we're going to have two different parameters. Not every din will have two parameters. Some parameters are just black and white, bright distinctions between, kosher and treif, or mutter and asa. But there are many instances where, and we're going to see it in this case, where we're going to need a higher and a lower parameter, what's called the murderer or the victim. It does at what point do we say it's murder? The fetus, is that called murder? Inside hitting the woman who's pregnant and she having a miscarriage, is that called murder? Okay. So then we're going to have to define that's called hagbalot. Okay. So I can't answer the question.
Maybe let me just jump in for a second. We have about 4 minutes, and Josh has been kind of quiet. Yaakov, want to see if there's any questions that have come up for anybody. If y'all have any questions, Benji, you're kind of new to this, of course. If you have any questions, David, you're welcome to ask. Let's just make sure that we don't. Well, I guess it's sometimes good to leave confused, but does anyone have any questions?
Well, I would just say on the first pasuk, we don't have an actor, and so it seems, logical to me that when they're tied together, it brings something together. Because with no actor, does that mean that if an animal hits a person, the animal should be put to death? Or is an animal a potential actor? Or is the fact that if some living object hits, it leaves that open. And so I think the second pasuk really ties together the first one, although I don't know how I would have found it on my own. I'm understanding at least how the two together sort of meld to quantify and qualify the activity, which was by design presented in the Torah for research to to get to a point where we were able to deduce this.
Okay, so here's a chart that we're going, of course, I want you to go through all of this, Rashi, but here's a chart which sort of demonstrates how this pasuk is going to define parameters. Okay, if this is the poel, the person is doing the action. Makaish, if the first pasuk doesn't talk about the subject, we would have gone with an unstated subject all the way down to the katan. And even if a katan killed another person, we would say the death penalty. Once I have the second pasuk of ish, that ups the murderer to only an ish and not a katan. Okay, so
What's a katan?
this is what we're, excuse me?
What's that? Katan?
Child, I think.
Oh, child.
Minor,
Child.
yeah.
Wait,
A
so
minor, a
so
minor.
it sounds like David was 100% right when he said that it didn't list the actor in the first pasuk. We go to like the Rav said, we go to the broadest category, which the most normal thing to assume there would be even a child.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Okay.
Oh, interesting.
And that's exactly, now you're learning what Torah is about. That's how Torah has to be studied. Torah has to define all.
You went mute or something.
Rabbi, we can't hear you. I'm not sure why. I could see that you're talking, but
Oh, we're starting to maybe.
oh, I think we could hear you again. But he can't hear us now?
I'm not sure.
All right, we're 1 minute to 11.
Yeah. Okay. I think he got cut off. I think this is good timing to stop. This was great shiur, guys.